Without objection, I think we will move on to our next speaker. And Jim, did you want to introduce our next speaker?
Yes, and I apologize. I'm having some network issues here, so hopefully I can get this in before I break out. But I wanted to introduce Hasan Ikhrata from SANDAG. Many of you know him. Not really much of an introduction needed, but I will go ahead and do it. Considered one of the preeminent transportation planning experts in the nation, Hasan is the executive director of SANDAG and is the leading research planning and transportation agency for the San Diego region. Mr. Ikhrata leads a staff of about 350 professionals who develop public policy initiatives for elected officials on numerous issues, encompassing population growth, transportation, environmental management, economic development, municipal finance, binational coordination, and public safety. Mr. Ikhrata has more than 30 years of public and private sector transportation planning experience. He holds a bachelor's and a master's degree in civil and industrial engineering from the University in the former Soviet Union, a master's degree in civil engineering from UCLA, and a PhD candidacy in urban planning and transportation from the University of Southern California. Prior to joining SANDAG in 2018, Hasan worked for Southern California Association of Governments, the Los Angeles County Metropolitan Transportation Authority, and South Coast Air Quality Management District. Mr. Ikhrata is an adjunct professor in the business school at California State University, Northridge. Without further ado, Hasan, I turn it over to you.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you very much. And good morning to all of you and Happy New Year. To all of you, I salute you. I thank the South County ADC for giving us support for our TIP application. I'm happy to report to you, if you haven't heard already, we have received $177 million for Otay 2 and Los Angeles. So our region did really well, but thank you for your support. Board member Moot, executive director Jim, it's good to see all of you. And I met with Jim a while back, and you know, we came from the same place to San Diego, and I'm sure I can speak for Jim. We're glad we're here. Good to be with you today. We are gonna give you a presentation of how we move forward with our regional transportation plan. But first of all, let me salute Mayor Solis, Council Member Marcus Bush. I believe Mayor Dedina is here from Imperial Beach. These are our leaders. Who's gonna, you know, if anything goes wrong, you need to blame them for not moving the plan forward. If anything goes right, then that means SANDAG did something right. But I want to salute all of you. This is gonna be a great year for SANDAG and for the region. This year, we will be opening the largest infrastructure projects in San Diego County. That's the Mid-Coast. That's gonna offer one seat ride from the border to the university. This year, we're also gonna adopt our regional transportation plan. This year, we're gonna actually, in a couple of weeks, we're gonna go to our board and ask them to approve a social equity statement to make sure SANDAG is unambiguous of standing for what's right, overcoming the sins of the past when it comes to transportation and moving forward in an equitable way in the future. But the 5 big moves that you heard about is really about reimagining the future of transportation system in San Diego. And I you know, when people ask me, so what do you want to do? And I would say, I want San Diegans to dream of big ideas and make it happen. And the 5 big move is about that. And I'm happy to report to you that we have presented to almost all the state agencies, the governor's office, the Office of Planning and Research, the California Transportation Commission at the state level, and every single entity would say maybe SANDAG need to lead the state in redefining how we do planning in the future. And this is all done because we have an amazing team working on it. You heard from them before, and you're gonna hear from them today. This team is unmatched. and I am so honored and privileged to work with them. But I also want to thank you for allowing us to talk to you today. And in the past, I want to thank you and thank the leaders here who are willing to give us a chance and allow San Diegans to dream big. And with that, I'm going to turn the presentation to Ray Major, our Chief Economist and Chief Analytics data, and to our amazing Planning Director, Colin Clemson.
Good morning. Thank you very much for having us talk a little bit about our vision for the future. I have to apologize in advance. I have low bandwidth this morning. If it persists as a problem, Colin is going to take over. So I'm going to shut off my video and just talk about the slides. Next slide, please. One of the things that we did when Hasan came on board was to really reimagine the entire way that we were going to go about doing regional planning. And historically, what we had done was simply to update our old plan and kind of put some new projects in, move things around on a timeline. But Hasan really wanted us to take a look at this from the ground up. And so we really started to use data as a foundation to look at what would be the most equitable way to lay out a transportation plan. Next slide, please. And when we really look at it, there are three challenges that we really need to that we face when we're designing a plan. We need to come up with a solution for the congestion that we have on our roads and highways, but we also need to take a look at this from the lens of social equity, and we need to be able to meet our state and federal mandates. And these three things really represent the iron triangle that we're working on at SANDAG, which is how do we solve all three of these at the same time? And so we turn to data to really come up with a fairer, faster, and cleaner solution to our transportation plan. Next slide, please. You know, as we developed this plan, we also ended up in the COVID crisis, and we are taking into account data that we're getting from surveys that we're doing and data that we're collecting as a team to really understand how COVID is changing transportation in the region. But let me talk a little bit about the data-driven approach. We started to take a look at the region, not from standard geographies like cities and census tracts and zip codes, but we started to take a look at it based upon where people actually live and actually work and try to tie those together. And these maps just show where the majority of the population in San Diego exists and where the employment centers are within San Diego. And pretty much what ends up happening is that most of the people need to commute to one of these employment centers. Now, there are more employment centers than this, but these are the largest ones. Next slide, please. So one of the things that we started to use is big data, and this was very exciting. This is the first plan where we were able to take a look at not just survey data, but to take a look at cell phone data to really understand how people travel throughout the region. And this graph, these maps basically show how people travel. And you can see the darker lines represent more trips, and you can see that they're kind of moving to the employment centers. You see a lot moving to Serrano Valley. You see a lot of people coming up from the South Bay who are moving to downtown, into the Mission Valley area, and also Kearny Mesa. That's their end destination. And the South Bay has some of the longest trips to get to work of any community within the San Diego region. Next, please. We were also able to start to take a look at data that we hadn't previously really been able to use. Things like what happens to all of the travel that comes across the border. The San Ysidro border crossing is the busiest border crossing in the Western Hemisphere, and we kind of lose track of those people when we are doing this analysis. And so with these green lines show that we can now take into account where those trips end. We also take a look at major activity centers. So San Diego is a big destination for both tourists and also business travel, and they make trips, and we take those into account now too, and we can do that because of the cell phone data. Continue, please. Next slide. And finally, we take a look at the military population, which has always been hard for us to track, and how they move throughout the region. When you take a look at all of this information, really, that's when we start to talk about big data, and we need to use machine learning techniques to really try to figure out how all these people move around the region each and every day. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. The plan also takes into account social equity, which is a very big concern in this particular plan. And we looked at the entire plan through this lens. And one of the things that we realized is that the current system that we have in place does really not provide for low-income travel. That travel is not competitive with the automobile. 51 minutes to travel for work is really not competitive. It takes about twice as long on public transportation. This plan addresses some of those concerns. Next slide.
Maybe I'll jump in here, Ray, because I think you're breaking up a little bit, and just to kind of wrap up, and if we want to just kind of go through these slides quickly, there's a lot of data here that we've collected, statistics that have helped to inform the planning process. So you can continue to click through these until we get to the big 5 moves wheel. So continue on here, all these important aspects. Okay, so the 5 big moves, we've taken all this data that Ray has talked about, statistics, thinking about what our state and federal mandates are, and we've applied the 5 big moves: complete corridors, transit leap, mobility hubs, flexible fleets, and the next operating system to truly put together a transformative transportation system for the region's future. And if you go to the next slide, we start to talk about complete corridors. We're really talking about, in every one of our roadway corridors, considering all modes of transportation and organizing it. This group we know cares so much about goods movement, making sure that we have considerations for goods movement, high-speed transit, carpools, being able to manage the system so when there are emergencies, we can move things around. Here's an example of transit leap, really bringing together high-speed transit in key locations throughout the region. The next slide gets to what we talk about with flexible fleets. I know this is something Mayor Solis talks about. What are the ways that we can get to high-speed transit? And these are shared, eventually autonomous and clean vehicles, whether it's shared bikes or shared scooters. And all this comes together in mobility hubs. This is an example of a mobility hub in Sorrento Valley. The next slide shows what a mobility hub could look like. The central mobility hub, probably one of the jewels of the network, is really a central mobility hub with a direct connection to the airport. Finally, a transit connection to the airport. And here's an iconic image of what that could look like. Next slide really gets to, let's think about San Ysidro. This is an existing mobility hub that we can actually make so much better. Again, bringing in the high-speed transit so you can get downtown San Diego in 30 minutes, not the hour that it takes today. The next slide shows how this can all come together with flexible fleets and businesses, and making these really exciting, vibrant places throughout the San Diego region. The next slide shows how this all comes together, and you can just click through all of these. So the first thing is we add in the complete corridors, considerations for our rural roadways for evacuation routes, the high-speed transit network, and connecting all the mobility hubs. We're in the process right now of doing all that technical work to make sure that we're doing something meaningful in terms of meeting our greenhouse gas emissions, in terms of addressing congestion, and addressing social equity in a meaningful way. We anticipate releasing the plan later this spring, so the first part of May, and this plan will be in front of the SANDAG Board of Directors in the fall of 2021. We look forward to having additional conversations with you all on this. We know that your time is short this morning. Here's a number of ways to stay connected, and feel free to reach out to Hasan or Ray or me with any questions you have. So to wrap that up, I'll turn it back to the chair. Thank you.